Hello, my friends. Welcome to the English Diary podcast, where every word has a story, every sentence sparks emotion, and English feels like your own language. Welcome to today's episode, where we dive deep into one of the most powerful skills for mastering English as a second language, thinking directly in English, without translating from your native language. Many learners struggle with fluency, not because they lack vocabulary or grammar knowledge, but because their brain is stuck in the loop of translating every thought. Imagine this. Someone asks you a simple question in English, like, "What do you eat for breakfast?" But instead of answering immediately, your brain first hears the sentence, then translates it into your mother tongue, forms an answer in your mother tongue, and then translates it back into English. That extra process creates a delay, hesitation, and sometimes mistakes. The goal is to train your brain to skip that step and think directly in English, as if it were your natural language. Now, why does translation slow you down? Well, language is not just about words. It's about context, culture, and patterns of thought. For example, in many languages the sentence structure is very different from English. If you always rely on translation, you'll end up using your native structure in English, which can sound unnatural. On the other hand, when you start thinking directly in English, sentences flow more naturally, your speed improves, and your confidence grows. So how do you make this shift? It's not something that happens overnight, but with consistent practice, it becomes natural. Let's talk about some effective methods. One powerful technique is immersing yourself in English. Think of it as surrounding your brain with English input, so much that it doesn't have time to translate. Watch movies in English, but not with subtitles in your native language. If you need subtitles, use English subtitles. This way, your brain associates sound and meaning directly in English, without involving your mother tongue. Another great exercise is self-talk. I know it may sound strange, but speaking to yourself in English is one of the best ways to train your brain. For instance, while you're cooking, describe to yourself what you are doing. Say things like, "I am chopping the onions. Now I am adding some oil to the pan." When you walk outside, you can say in your mind, "The weather is nice today. That person is walking a dog. The bus is coming." By doing this, you practice forming thoughts in English spontaneously, without translation. A very common question learners ask is, "But what if I don't know the right word?" That's okay. If you don't know a word, don't switch back to your native language. Instead, describe it using simple English. For example, if you forget the word umbrella, you can say the thing that you use when it rains. This keeps you in English mode. Over time, you will fill those gaps with the right words, and your fluency will grow. Visualization is another powerful technique. Let's say you're trying to remember vocabulary. Instead of connecting the English word to your native word, connect it directly to an image or a situation. For example, when you learn the word apple, don't think apple means seb or apple means manjana. Instead, imagine a red apple. Imagine eating it. Imagine the taste. This way, the English word is directly linked to the concept, not your native language. Consistency is key here. Even small daily habits make a big difference. You don't need to study for 5 hours a day. Just 10 or 15 minutes of thinking in English can create powerful progress. Try choosing specific times in the day when you will only think in English. For example, during your morning routine, or while commuting, or before going to sleep. In those moments, train your brain to stay in English. Listening actively is also crucial. Many learners listen to English but don't really process it. Passive listening helps, but active listening is stronger. Active listening means paying close attention, repeating sentences in your head, and even shadowing the speaker. Shadowing means speaking at the same time as the speaker, repeating their words, their intonation, and rhythm. This technique is used by professional interpreters, and it's incredibly effective to train your brain to think fast in English. Another mental shift is to stop aiming for perfection. A lot of learners freeze because they want to form the perfect sentence. But fluency is not about perfection, it's about communication. Children learn to speak their first language without perfect grammar at the beginning, but they still communicate. Similarly, when you allow yourself to make mistakes, you remove the pressure, and thinking in English becomes easier. I also want to talk about reading. Reading in English is like a workout for your brain. But don't read with the mindset of translating every word. Choose books or articles at your level, and try to get the meaning from context. If you don't understand one or two words, skip them and focus on the overall idea. Over time, your brain learns to predict meaning in English without relying on translation. Journaling is another simple but powerful tool. Write your daily thoughts in English, even short sentences. Don't translate your diary from your native language. Just write directly in English. It could be something like, "Today I felt tired, but I enjoyed my coffee." With time, your written thoughts will also become natural in English. And finally, practice patience. Thinking directly in English is like building a muscle. At first, it feels unnatural and slow. But the more you practice, the more automatic it becomes. One day, you'll realize that you are having a thought in English without even trying. That moment is magical, and it proves your brain has adapted. So to summarize the first part of our journey, thinking in English means breaking the habit of translation, creating direct connections between English and meaning, and practicing consistently through self-talk, visualization, reading, listening, and writing. In the next part, we will go deeper into advanced techniques, practical exercises, and mindset strategies to help you fully rewire your brain for English thinking. One of the most powerful techniques you can use is the concept of language islands. This means preparing certain topics or situations in advance and building a set of ready-made sentences in English around them. For example, let's say you often talk about your job. Instead of translating each time, you prepare sentences like, "I work in an office, I have meetings every morning," or "My boss is very supportive." By practicing these islands of language, your brain becomes comfortable and quick. Later, you can connect these islands together and expand your fluency. Another great method is to use chunk learning. Instead of memorizing single words, memorize phrases or expressions. For instance, instead of learning only the word book, learn the phrase pick up a book, read a book, or put the book down. By doing this, you think in phrases, not in isolated words, and that makes your English sound more natural. Native speakers rarely think word by word, they think in chunks. If you train yourself this way, translation disappears because you no longer build sentences from scratch in your native language. Let's talk about environment. The place and atmosphere around you can influence how your brain thinks. If you always use your native language at home, at work, and with friends, then switching into English mode feels harder. But if you create an English-rich environment, your brain adjusts. For example, label objects in your house with English words. Put mirror on the mirror, door on the door, fridge on the fridge. Each time you see the object, your brain associates it directly with the English word, not with your native language. Music is another underestimated tool. When you listen to English songs, don't just enjoy the melody. Pay attention to the lyrics, sing along, and try to catch the rhythm of the language. Music helps with pronunciation, memory, and intonation. And because songs stick in your head, they help you think in English naturally. Now, let's talk about speed. Many learners hesitate because they are afraid of making mistakes. But fluency is more about speed than accuracy in the beginning. Try speaking faster, even if it's not perfect. This forces your brain to stop overthinking and translating. For example, give yourself a challenge. Speak for 1 minute non-stop about any topic. Maybe describe your favorite food, your childhood memory, or your dream vacation. The goal is not perfection, but flow. Over time, your accuracy will catch up. There's also a technique called thinking aloud. Normally, people practice silent thinking in English. But when you speak your thoughts out loud, you give your brain double reinforcement, both auditory and physical. You hear yourself and you feel yourself producing English. This creates stronger connections and helps you think directly in English. A lot of learners also ask, should I completely avoid my native language? The answer is no. Your native language is part of who you are, and it's valuable. But when you're practicing English thinking, you should create separate spaces. For example, you can decide that for 30 minutes you will not allow yourself to use your native language at all. During that time, if you don't know a word, you must describe it or find another way. This discipline strengthens your English brain. Visualization can go even further. Try mental role play. Imagine you are in a restaurant in New York or London. The waiter comes and says, "What would you like to order?" Instead of translating your order, imagine yourself answering directly in English. "I'll have the chicken sandwich, please." You can do role plays for many situations: traveling, shopping, making friends, even job interviews. This way, you prepare your brain for real-life English thinking. One of the biggest challenges learners face is internal dialogue. All of us have a voice in our head that comments on daily life. Usually, that voice speaks in our native language. But you can slowly switch that inner voice to English. For example, when you see something interesting, instead of thinking, try to think, "Wow, that's nice." At first, it feels strange, but gradually, your inner voice becomes bilingual, and eventually, you can run it mostly in English. Memory also plays a key role. To think in English, you need to have enough vocabulary stored in your brain. But memory improves when you connect emotions to words. So when you learn new English words, don't just write them down. Use them in a funny sentence, act them out, or connect them with a strong image. The more emotional the memory, the faster you recall the word when you need it. Interaction with real people is also powerful. Talking to native speakers or other English learners forces your brain to stay in English mode. Apps, online communities, or language exchange partners are great for this. When you interact, you don't have the luxury of translating everything. You must respond quickly. That pressure is healthy. It pushes your brain to adapt. Another technique is shadow journaling. This is when you listen to a podcast or watch a video in English, and then immediately write a short summary in English from memory. This exercise helps your brain process input and output directly in English. For example, after listening to a short TED Talk, you can write 3 to 5 sentences like, "The speaker talked about technology. He explained how it changes our life. I found it very interesting." This forces your brain to connect ideas without translation. And let's not forget the power of mindset. If you believe that you cannot think in English, then your brain will resist. But if you believe it is possible and remind yourself daily, then your brain opens up. Many learners think, "I will never be as fluent as a native speaker." But remember, fluency is not about being native. It's about expressing yourself clearly, naturally, and confidently. Thinking in English is the gateway to that fluency. So in this second part, we explored practical tools, language islands, chunk learning, environmental changes, music, speed practice, role play, inner dialogue, memory techniques, real interaction, and shadow journaling. These are not just theories, they're practices you can start today. The more you use them, the more your brain will automatically shift into English thinking mode. One of the most common obstacles is fear of making mistakes, fear of sounding silly, or fear of not being understood. This fear often pushes learners back into their comfort zone, which is their native language. But here's the truth. Mistakes are not only natural, they are necessary. Every time you make a mistake in English, your brain learns something new. Think of it like this. Each mistake is like a workout for your brain muscles. The more you lift, the stronger you get. If you avoid mistakes, you avoid growth. Another challenge is impatience. Many learners want results quickly. They think, "I've been practicing for 1 month, but I still translate sometimes." But thinking in English is not a one-month project. It's a long-term transformation. Think of it like training for a marathon. You don't run 26 miles after 1 week of practice. You build stamina slowly. The same goes for building an English-thinking brain. Patience and consistency beat speed every time. Let's talk about habit building. The best way to make English thinking automatic is to tie it to existing habits. For example, if you brush your teeth every morning, use those 2 minutes to think in English. I am brushing my teeth. I feel fresh. I have a meeting later today. If you drink tea or coffee, use that time to describe your plans in English. These small connections make the habit stick because your brain links English thinking with daily activities. Now, let's look at an advanced technique, switching perspectives. Often, learners only practice speaking about themselves. But real fluency requires flexibility. So try to imagine different perspectives in English. For example, imagine you are a shopkeeper talking to a customer, or a tour guide explaining a city, or even a news reporter describing an event. By practicing different roles, you expand your brain's ability to think in diverse ways, not just in personal conversation. Another powerful exercise is timed storytelling. Take a random topic. Let's say a trip to the beach. Now, set a timer for 2 minutes and tell a story in English without stopping. Don't worry about mistakes. Just keep going. Afterward, try again, but this time improve your sentences. This trains your brain to think quickly in English while also building clarity. You can also use questions as triggers. Write down a list of simple questions like, what is your favorite movie? What did you do yesterday? What will you do tomorrow? Every day, answer a few of these questions out loud in English. This practice works because questions force you to generate answers on the spot, just like in real conversations. Now, let's deal with vocabulary gaps. Even advanced learners sometimes forget words. The key is not to panic. Use what I call the 3-second rule. If you can't remember a word in 3 seconds, explain it in simple English. For example, if you forget the word ceiling, say, the wall above my head. This keeps the flow alive and prevents translation from taking over. Technology can also be your ally. Use voice assistants like Siri or Google Assistant in English. Ask them questions in English, give commands, and interact naturally. These small practices make English a part of your daily life, and your brain starts to switch automatically. Another strategy is emotional connection. We remember things more when they touch our emotions. So, connect English practice with something you truly care about. If you love sports, follow sports news in English. If you enjoy cooking, watch recipes in English and describe the process in English while cooking. When passion is involved, your brain engages more deeply, and thinking in English becomes easier. Let's talk about code switching. Sometimes bilingual people mix languages in one sentence. While this is normal, if your goal is to think fully in English, you should minimize code switching during practice. Create clear boundaries. For example, decide, during this 1 hour, I will only use English. Later, you can return to your native language. These clear boundaries help your brain train in one mode at a time. Repetition is also critical. Many learners get bored of repeating the same sentences. But repetition is what makes patterns automatic. Think about how you learned to ride a bicycle. You repeated the same motions until they became natural. The same happens with English sentences. Repetition may feel boring, but it's the secret to fluency. Another advanced tool is mindfulness. Often, our brains run on autopilot, and we don't notice our thoughts. If you want to control your inner voice and switch it into English, you need awareness. Start by observing your thoughts. Each time you catch yourself thinking in your native language, pause and gently switch to English. This mindfulness practice slowly rewires your default thinking. A related method is meditation with English affirmations. For example, sit quietly for 5 minutes and repeat sentences in English like, I am confident in English, I think clearly in English, English flows through me naturally. These affirmations may sound simple, but they create a positive mindset that influences how your brain operates. Now, let's discuss interaction at a higher level. When you speak with native speakers, don't focus only on words. Pay attention to rhythm, intonation, and pauses. These are part of thinking in English too. For example, in English people often pause after short phrases. Well, it's kind of interesting. If you imitate these patterns, your thinking also starts to follow the natural rhythm of English. Another advanced practice is called paraphrasing. When you hear or read something in English, try to express the same idea in different words. For example, if you hear, "She was very tired," you can rephrase, "She felt exhausted." This builds flexibility and ensures you can think in multiple ways in English, not just copy exact sentences. And don't underestimate humor. Laughing in English, enjoying jokes, or even making your own jokes in English activates a deeper emotional connection. Humor is a sign of true fluency because it requires quick thinking. So, watch comedy shows in English, try to catch the jokes, and even create small funny sentences yourself. Finally, let's talk about identity. Many learners feel that English is a foreign language that doesn't belong to them. But to think in English naturally, you must adopt it as part of your identity. Tell yourself, "I am a bilingual person," or "I am an English speaker." When you shift your identity, your brain accepts English not as a school subject, but as part of who you are. So, in this third part, we looked at overcoming fear and impatience, building habits, switching perspectives, timed storytelling, question triggers, vocabulary gaps, emotional connection, code switching, repetition, mindfulness, affirmations, rhythm, paraphrasing, humor, and identity. All these strategies are designed to push your brain deeper into English thinking and help you overcome obstacles.